to talk about Scottish nationalism and how it's destroying Scotland. And as an example upon which to focus, I will talk about the Speenbridge Hotel. It says here, it's driving tourism away from the Highland Village. Why would a hotel in a Highland Village drive tourism away? Because it's in a state of dilapidation. And it's in a state of dilapidation because nobody's coming. And for another reason, I'll get to that in a minute. Now, let's just, I'm sorry, here, I'll now show you a picture of the Speenbridge Hotel. Reader view, I mean, the Herald is so full of adverts, it's almost unreadable. So I have to resort to this. It was once a thriving hotel at the heart of a Highland community which celebrated the area's link to one of the finest Allied training centres in the Second World War. So it was a great hotel. Now, obviously, people aren't going out to pubs so much anymore. Video games, YouTube, and drink driving laws have stopped a lot of that. But the Speenbridge Hotel also had a lot of tourists. And tourists to Scotland were mainly from England. And when the English start to feel like they're not welcome, they don't go. Now, if you're an American or French and you want to go to Scotland for a visit, yeah, they'll be quite helpful. But I myself have had an unpleasant experience with somebody the last time I was on a visit to Scotland to visit relatives. Somebody who obviously felt empowered to be anti-English. And it's not, even if you are in England, have never been to Scotland before and you're thinking of somewhere for your holidays, there's this feeling that you might not be entirely welcome in Scotland, so you just think of somewhere else. And you get stuff like this. There've been marches in Scotland with Tory scum out. This is also in the Herald. Well, okay, Tory scum out. I mean, everybody hates the Tories, so that's not particularly Scottish. There have been protesters at transport hubs. That is, I suppose, areas where the English roads come into Scotland, holding England get out of Scotland signs. I think that's probably a hint, isn't it, that you might not be welcome. And then Ian Blackford, a Scottish National Party MP in Westminster, polices Twitter asking why an English photographer was in Scotland. Now, this is a particularly egregious example. And here's the Daily Record's take on it. Again, a Scottish paper. Ian Blackford faced a barrage of criticism after he tweeted demanding Ollie Taylor explain himself for taking the snaps in the north of Scotland. This was during COVID, and he happened to know that Ollie Taylor was English. So he said, why is he there in Scotland? He had no idea about Ollie Taylor's symptoms. I mean, he might have just been there on holiday and got stuck because of a COVID lockdown. There could have been any number of reasons. But the fact that he was English, and the Blackford immediately jumped on that. So what had happened was Ollie Taylor had moved to Scotland. Here, you see, this is what Blackford said. As you live in the south of England and travel to Scotland is only for permitted reasons, I'm sure there'll be a valid reason as to why you're posting a photo from the north of Scotland last night. And just look at that beautiful photo. This photo is something that people can look at and think, oh, I want to go to Scotland to see sites like this. There are areas of Scotland that are just gobsmackingly beautiful. But then you get Blackford, instead of saying, oh, this is wonderful, just look how you're showing how beautiful Scotland is. The only thing he could think of is going at him for being English. As it turns out, Taylor had moved there shortly before lockdown had happened, shortly before the COVID thing hit. So he had every valid reason to be there. But the fact that he was English and you get this sort of instant prejudice, which is almost, I'd say, psychiatric levels of hatred. And then we get Rhiannon Spear. I don't know who she is, but she said, "We hate the United Kingdom too" during Eurovision. You know, we being the Scots. Well, people read this stuff and they think, well, why would I go to Scotland for a holiday? And then this. Moira Shemlett, another SNP councillor, "We are not England's holiday park." Well, with respect, you are. English people go to Scotland. Well, there are a lot of posh people who go for the grouse shooting, or people who want to feel like they're posh and go for the grouse shooting. Why do you bother about that? They are going to Scotland, spending their money and feeling great, provided nobody insults them while they're there. And then you get a lot of hikers, people who like hiking in the Cairngorms and that sort of thing. They go to Scotland to enjoy the absolutely astonishing scenery, but not to enjoy the weather, because the weather's pretty bad, and that's the problem with Scotland. It has very few resources apart from this gobsmacking beauty. There's a lot of Scotland that beauty comes at the cost of not being much good for growing stuff. So Scotland is not that fertile. There are areas in the lowlands where you can grow stuff. The highlands are really pretty bad. And the resources are pretty tight, except for oil, which, as the oil market shrinks, is also going to shrink. So Scotland really needs English tourism. But then they're not getting it because people aren't going to the Speenbridge Hotel anymore. And part of the reason will be because the feeling among English people is that they're not going to have much fun in Scotland, and they might go there, spend their money for 2 weeks and then get insulted. And I am interrupting myself to remind you I'm Granniopteryx on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I'm also on Twitter, Gab and Parler, where I am at Granniopteryx, and it's there that I let you know when I've uploaded a new video. Please help my channel by liking this video, sharing it and subscribing. If you're on YouTube, check your subscription is still active. And you can help me financially, buy me a coffee or one of the other. There are 3 links in the description to platforms you can use to donate. Right, that's it. Back to Scotland. The feeling among English people is that they're not going to have much fun in Scotland, and they might go there, spend their money for 2 weeks and then get insulted. So here it says, Anglophobia helped drive me out of Scotland. Here's somebody who's actually left Scotland. After 25 years living north of the border, Jenny Hewell describes the nationalist rhetoric that led to her decision to up sticks for England. She married a Scot. They lived in Scotland for 25 years, and she had enough feeling of resentment from the people there that finally they went back. They're now living in London and probably earning money and spending their money in London. Here's another one. And this is, you may hate the English, but don't say so, Scottish independence supporters told. So you see, this isn't a matter of you just want independence. This is a matter of you hate the English and you want independence. Now, there is no political party in England that has to issue instructions to its followers not to be hateful towards Scottish people. It just wouldn't appear in their universe. But it does in the Scottish National Party, because they've had to institute this code of conduct, because there's so much. You see, when you get a sort of empowerment of hate, then you get people who are on the edge tipping over, just like that guy who was very offensive to me when I was last in Scotland. Scottish independence activists are to be urged to promise not to speak ill of the English amid fears Anglophobia could wreck their dreams of separation. Now, I don't know whether that would wreck their dreams, but it's certainly going to do a lot to the Scottish economy, because it is going to stop people from feeling like they don't want to go there. And even worse, it's a matter of investing. If I were running a company and we were thinking of taking over somewhere in Scotland, you know, a property like maybe the Speenbridge Hotel, we'd think, well, how much cooperation are we going to get from the locals? There is a worry about that. So what's happened to the Speenbridge Hotel? Well, after years of underinvestment, according to locals, and frequent ownership changes, Speenbridge Hotel, which has been labelled a carbuncle, and it appears to have been taken over by a Chinese company. It was taken over by Omega Travel, and specialising in bringing Oriental visitors to the UK. Actually, there's a university in Scotland I happen to know of who actually relies on Chinese students now. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, Ming Liang Cheng is named on Company House as director of Speenbridge Hotel Limited. So it does see, and Ming Liang Cheng is also a director of a company called Pagoda Travel. I'd say it was definitely a Chinese company, and as we know, Chinese companies that appear to be different or separate from the Chinese government, generally speaking, are not. They are just branches of the Chinese government. So I'd actually put money on this being a part of the Chinese government. Well, in principle, that's not wrong. But it appears there's a reasonable amount of Chinese takeover in Scotland. So why is this happening? It's happening because the Scots would prefer it's sort of anything but the English. You cannot use a policy of anything but the whoever it is to run a country. And it's obvious that the Chinese company that have taken over Speenbridge Hotel don't care about it that much. Just look at the picture. And not only is it a carbuncle in itself, but of course when people are driving through the village, they see this old ruin, they're not bothered about the village either. Well, you might say that's a matter of policy. As the village disintegrates, as people don't come, people will move out of Speenbridge, and then the properties will go more cheaply, and that could be a plan, couldn't it? Anyway, it's because of what's happening with the way the SNP are running Scotland, really. They are empowering hatred. They're empowering a takeover of people who have no interest in the country at all. You may not particularly like the English, but they were the ones who were coming to Scotland quite a lot. But now they're deciding it isn't their holiday park. So they're not coming. And so now you're taking people who really have no particular interest in the place. And this is very sad. Right, well, yeah, that's how the SNP is ruining Scotland. And I'm very sorry about that. All right, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.